Hey everyone, this is Tankenstein coming to you live and direct from Milvanore, the center of everywhere, to bring to you today your full review of the TSAR BOMBA, brand new fighter for the Soviet tech tree. Is a premium plane, basically an event vehicle sitting at rank 3, battle rating 3.7, and this is an absolute beast. I'll be going over quite a bit in this video. I'll be going over kind of how to play this plane, really some of the quirks with it, and I will also be going over some quick pros and cons with it, especially compared to other similar fighters, and also give you a final recommendation as to whether or not you should earn this plane if it's still in Operation Frost, or purchase it if it is after Operation Frost and available on the marketplace. My guess is it will be between $5 and $10 USD. Again, local currencies kind of vary, but give or take around that much USD. So that being said, remember, like, comment, subscribe, especially subscribe. It all means a ton to me. But without further ado, let's get into it. So really, I'd say the biggest and most important thing with this plane, the thing that most people are drawn to, is this wacky offensive armament capability. So it has two different types of offensive armament. And really the thing that I think makes this very special is that you can't change the secondary armament like you could in, let's say, a Dornier 335 or whatever the case may be. So with this, you can simply just change your secondary armament from 15 to 20 millimeter cannons. But in the USSR's TSAR BOMBA, you have to do it prior to the match. So unlike a lot of other planes where you can just simply decide based on what you're seeing out of the enemy whether or not you want to have the larger or the smaller cannons, you have to decide it before you even click the to battle button. So it's a pretty unique sort of thing going on here, but I guess it does make sense being that these are such large cannons, and you can choose between them. So between the two cannons, with the 37 millimeter, I'd say it's a much more versatile option. It's really just incredibly powerful by itself. To the point where if this plane just had 37 millimeter cannons, I would not be necessarily wishing for the 45s, because these are plenty good by themselves. You have the default ammo option, which has armor piercing, high explosive. You have the air target, which is just high explosive, and the armored, which is, again, just the armored piercing. So it's really great in both roles. The armor piercing is quite effective. It has a max of 60 millimeters of pen, but really you're going to see anywhere between around 50 and 30 millimeters of penetration at typical sort of attack angles and ranges. When it comes to the air targets, it's quite effective. It's actually got around 52 grams of TNT equivalent explosive mass, which I would say is excellent. The 45 has a very similar, their default ammunition type is the air target type for the offensive for the 37 millimeter, and you get around 80 grams of TNT equivalent from this. But it does also leave the muzzle a bit slower. This goes 780 meters per second as opposed to the 900 with this. So there's quite a few things you can choose from, but even if you want to go for air targets, let's say bombers or whatever the case may be with your 45, you still have the option of selecting a secondary weapon between the bombs that can go from 100 kilograms up to 500, or two different types of rockets. The RS-132 being the more explosive type of rocket, but it does have an even armor penetration statistic throughout. So whether you're at 10 millimeters and or 10 meters of distance and 0 degrees, or 2,000 meters and 60 degrees, you will still have the same penetration. The RBS-132 is a different story. It does have higher penetration at typical attack angles, but it does have significantly less explosive mass. So this is, again, a heck of a plane. It's really just a unique beast in this game, and it's kind of like the Bf-109C6, if I'm not mistaken, that being the most recent German event vehicle at the time of the publication of this video. And it is similar in that way, in that it has just crazy guns and is a heavy fighter and just kind of sits in its own unique place. So insofar as max speed is concerned, it's not fast at all. It's only 534 kilometers per hour, sitting at similar 3.7. You can see the I-185 and the M82 variant, and it goes around 80 kilometers per hour faster. Of course, it is a single engine plane, but still, that is what you will be facing. Turn time seems excellent, and it really is until you have to turn more than once. The main issue with this, again, is its max speed, and that limits its turn time pretty substantially beyond the initial turn. Rate of climb is the same, so even though this is more of a bomber buster sort of plane, really the biggest issue with it is its rate of climb. You will not be able to take out bombers late in the game, so really if you're going to go for them early on, or go for them after they've kind of went close to the ground if that's what they decide to do. But when it comes to the two guns, so typically I would say go with the 37 millimeter, but I actually just got out of a match with the 45 where with the 100 rounds of ammo between the two guns, I was able to take out 6 enemy fighters and I think get like two more assists right in the beginning of a match, which is ridiculous in my opinion. Just all based on head-ons and taking opportune times to hit them while they're making turns. So those 45s will get the job done, whereas the 37 millimeter, for whatever reason, might not. The 45, even though it acts as a shotgun and it's ridiculous, if you can shoot this in 2 to 3, maybe even 4 round bursts, you can do so much damage with it, and I would almost trust it more than the 37 millimeter when it comes to destroying planes because it just goes over the edge. It takes it from an extreme sort of armament here to just totally a weapon of mass destruction for the air. But without further ado, let's kind of go over some of the pros and cons, and I'll show you some gameplay video as well. So while I'm getting into the pros and cons, I want you to look at the gameplay that I captured that will be playing in the background while I was flying this plane. Just take note of how slow this thing is, unless, of course, it's diving, and also how crazy powerful it is. In the first clip, you'll see me wreck a BV-238 with the 37 millimeter cannons, and in the second, you'll see me annihilate 6 planes in a row and head-ons with the 45 millimeter cannons. Either way, let's get into the pros and cons and enjoy the gameplay in the background, as it does itself offer quite a few insights into how this plane flies. So for pros, I'll have to start with the ridiculous armament of this plane, and it's just insane at any BR that you play at. Burst is really one thing, but it's how this plane gets that burst. Regardless of if you choose the 37 millimeter or even the 45 millimeter cannons, you will have a beast in this plane. Versatility is another pro. This plane can really just do it all except outrun regular fighters, but I'll get into that with the cons. Agility, I would also say, is one of its pros. Just if you don't take into account how poor the speed is, it does handle quite well. And it also does have defensive armament. Now, this isn't really insanely important, but it is one of those things that might get you a kill here and there, and it might kind of dissuade fighters from attacking you. Insofar as cons are concerned, there are quite a few. It is pretty slow, even for this BR. It had both large caliber cannon options, especially the 45 millimeter cannons, overheat extremely quickly and really just limit you to 4 or 5 round bursts at max. Poor accuracy for both of the large cannons, but much more so for the 45 millimeters. It loses speed very quickly as the engines just simply cannot push this plane through a turning fight. The 45 millimeter cannons also only have one ammo option, so that does limit your versatility, and that kind of leads into my next con. You have to select the gun type before the match, which itself has huge implications on the role of this plane in the game. If you could select anti-armor rounds for the 45, I would say it's not nearly as big of an issue, but because the 45 is merely limited to anti-air, more specifically, typically anti-bomber roll, you will have kind of a difficult time with that. So it's really just all about having to pick your gun before the match even begins, doing it blindfolded. And I would say that's the biggest con of this plane, even more so than the speed and the just kind of the deficiencies between the two cannons. So functionally, I'd say this plane is probably closest to the PE-3 BIS, largely just because of its secondary loadout and the flight characteristics. although really the TIS beats it in almost every single way. Really, it's tough to say that the TIS is comparable to anything else in the game because it's more or less in a league of its own. It sports a combination of firepower so strongly suited to bomber killing and close air support that it may well end up being one of the best planes in the game for both categories, especially at its own BR. It would be an even better bomber hunter if its rate of climb and speed weren't so poor, stats of which kind of really further lend to this plane's credibility as a close air support beast. This being said, being that the 37mm cannons are incredible in either role, and the 45mm cannons are either just limited to lucky hits against small planes or for bomber hunting, you should probably pick the 37mm cannons before the match, just because, again, of how versatile they are. So default shells are not a bad option, but you'll likely want to choose either air or armor-piercing ammo to specify your role in game, whether for close air support or hunting the big birds. Additionally, you do have your secondary ammo options or your secondary weapon options from bombs to rockets, which are themselves extremely effective for this plane, and again do lend for the close air support role. So insofar as my recommendation for this plane is concerned as to whether or not you should either earn it during the Operation Frost event or purchase it afterwards in the marketplace, I'd say 100% do it. In the marketplace, it probably will not be all too expensive, and during Operation Frost, it's not the craziest, most difficult thing to earn. Just because it's like swinging a hammer at everything. And if you can survive in the early game and really make it to mid and late game with this plane, you will be a beast and get tons of kills more likely than not. Also, in close air support, it will absolutely dominate. So if you're playing those mid 3s and low 4 Soviet tanks, this plane is a must-have and realistic. Either way, this is Tankenstein signing out for tonight. Remember, like, comment, subscribe. It all means a ton to me. And I'll catch you guys later. Have a great night, great day, great whatever you're doing. Take care, everyone.